Welcome again to another installment of Donning the Armor. Today, we're going to start in Genesis chapter 13, verse 5. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's stock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So as we start going through this, Abram has returned to where he began. Before he set off and went down to Egypt and had all these different issues. But now he's become so wealthy, and Lot himself has become so wealthy, that their flocks are now starting to not be enough space for them together. And although Abram and Lot aren't at strife, aren't at odds with each other, the heads of their herds are, because Israel, not exactly a land of abundance when it comes to feeding sheep. Lots of times they would rely on small shoots of grass popping up overnight from the dew or the small amount of rain they would get, because it is a large wilderness. So when you're trying to lead the flocks from place to place, there's only so many places to feed from. So this is causing issues. And then it also mentions that at the time in that land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites still dwelt in the land as well, which meant the land had to sustain their flocks and their peoples. So Abram said to Lot, "Please, let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren." So Abram's telling Lot, "Look, we're having some issues with our herdsmen, and I don't want that, but I definitely don't want it to become an issue between you and me. You're my nephew. I don't want us to be so closely entangled that it helps us become bitter." And there's a lesson in that when, people go into business together, or when people share in things together, sometimes there becomes issues. And you need to know when to separate before those issues leak into your personal life, because our personal relationships are worth more than our businesses, so to speak. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the Garden of Eden, basically, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar. That's a descriptor from Moses to the people who are reading it, because they had come out of Egypt, so they knew what that part of the land looked like. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Now we see that although Abram is letting Lot make the decision, he is placing himself in the hands of the Lord. He's not forcing a decision. He's saying, "Look, you go where you wish, and I will let the Lord lead my steps to where I need to go." And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, which was the opposite way from Lot. Lot saw the abundance that it looked like the world had for him, that the cities had. And he went there irrespective of the reputation of the people of that area. And the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked against the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, "Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants could also be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. Now, a lot of people took that to mean that the Jews would be the ones to outnumber everybody. But as we see from our time now, Jewish people are very small in number. I mean, sometimes because they're so successful, people think that the Jews are this massive group. I mean, you have billions of Indians living in India. You have billions of Chinese in China. You have millions of Jews across the entire face of the earth. I believe it was at one point up to like 14 million. And then the Holocaust happened, and they have not recovered back up to that number. So when you think about how many Jewish people there are, they will never be as the dust of the earth. But, jumping ahead from where we are in the Old Testament, we know that when we Gentiles were grafted in through Christ, we became the descendants of Abraham. As was said, God can make these rocks the descendants of Abraham if he wished. And he did. So anybody now in Christ, throughout the whole history of this earth, from the crucifixion till now, over the last 2,000 years, and the people who looked to the Messiah before that, those are now the descendants of Abraham, because we've been grafted into the promise God just made to Abraham there. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. And it came to pass in the days of Apharel, king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, the king of nations, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Sinab, king of Adah, Shebar, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So you have these confederation of kings, all for a good chunk of time serving the one king, until they finally decided they had had enough and they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked Ram in Asheroth, Kenaraim, and Zuzim in Ham, and Emim in Sheva, Kerethaim, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. So we're getting set up with what exactly is happening, where they attacked, whom they attacked. And Moses is laying out all the places with which they were by what his people would know them as and where they would know these places as. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpah, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazon Tamar. And the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Adah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Tidal, the king of nations, Apharel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. So they go into battle. It doesn't go well. And he's mentioning the asphalt pits because he's saying some of these soldiers and everything, they were falling in there, and that's where they were dying. The remainder were able to flee the battlefield into the mountains. Then they all took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, that is the kings who won, and all their provisions, and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So the confederation of kings wiped through Sodom and Gomorrah. They took out their kings, then they went and looted their cities, because that's what you did in ancient warfare. But there's one problem, and that's where Lot was, Abram's nephew. He was dwelling in Sodom, and as they went through, they kidnapped him, his kin, and departed. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner, and they were allies with Abram. So somebody escaped, he came by, and they told these people. He was able to tell of what happened. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Now, once again, getting to the quick thing, Dan is northern Israel. It does not exist at the time of Abraham, because that's a son of Jacob, that's one of the 12 tribes. So once again, that is Moses laying out where these things would be. Or a later writer adding what this is, possibly Joshua, because it's also believed that Moses wrote most of the Torah, but Joshua was his disciple, so to speak, and he would be able to fill in anything else. But as you can see here, Abram had his own personal army. And that would be an issue for people. That is how wealthy he was. He had 318 trained servants. It doesn't even say all of his servants. He just says 318 trained servants. He had his own personal militia that he was able to defend his own belongings with. And in this case, take out to go take vengeance on those who kidnapped his nephew. He divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hova, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods, and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. You know, I've heard it said that Abram is the first action hero, and he was. And you know, as far as making biblical movies and things like this is one I wish they would make. The life of Abraham, and not just focus on him sacrificing Isaac all the time, because this would make an amazing story. Abram actually taking his own militia out to seek vengeance on those who kidnapped his nephew and his family. Because as we'll see, he didn't have any loyalty to any of the kings who were defeated. It was simply because of Lot. That's why he went. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him, being Abram, at the valley of Shava, that is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. So Sodom comes out of hiding from the mountains, seeing that Chedorlaomer has been defeated. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said. Now we come to a part where Melchizedek is one of the most mysterious figures in the Bible. He's mentioned in the Old Testament here, in a Psalm of David. He's also mentioned in the New Testament as Jesus being a priest from the line of Melchizedek. But we're not told what that line was. It has been, hypothesized, theorized that Melchizedek is from the line of Adam, so to speak. That Adam, being the first one, the first man, would be the first priest, because then you have Cain and Abel also sacrificing. So Melchizedek would be a priest of God, basically from the line of Adam. We don't know, but there are some interesting things that happen here, and he brings forth bread and wine. Also, symbols of the Last Supper, of the communion of Christ, where he breaks the bread and gives his disciples wine to drink as a remembrance of him, of his divine work on the cross. Now, people have theorized that maybe Melchizedek is a pre-incarnate Christ, a Christophany. However, it does list him as the king of Salem. So if Salem is an actual place, then that wouldn't be a pre-incarnate Christ, because he wouldn't be spirit. But it's very mysterious. We don't really know much. We do know here, though, that he brings forth what would eventually be the symbols of the covenant of communion. And he blesses Abram when he comes. Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand and gave him into your hand. Let's end it there, because that's where not where the verse ends, but that's where the quote ends from Melchizedek. So we see that he blesses Abram as the possessor of heaven and earth, as the covenant holder with God, and then blesses God, who has been faithful to deliver Abram's enemies into his hand and lead to a peaceful situation for those who were taken captive, because, captives not exactly treated well. And then Abram gave him a tithe of all. So Abram gives him a tithe. Before tithing is set up in the law, he gives him a tenth of all the spoils. And it refers to, the tithe also refers to the tenth of the best of all the spoils. He gave him, without trying to go through it and figure out what the best of everything is, he just gave a tenth to this priest who we know nothing about. But in the New Testament, this was used as a way to say, look, your father Abraham, when speaking to the Jews, your father Abraham gave a tenth of all to a line of priests in Melchizedek for whom Jesus came. So in a way, your descendant, your high priest Aaron, has tithed to Jesus already. He is the high priest above all. But continuing in Genesis, here in verse 21, now the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the persons and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I made Abram rich, except only that what these young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me from Anar, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So the king of Sodom is saying, look, just give me back the people who belong in my city, and you can have all of the riches for yourself. And Abram just says, no, because I will not be indebted to you. I will not have you taking credit for God's provision. God made me rich. God gave me all that I have. I will not allow you to go forth and say that you have been the one to make me rich, because when you were saved, you allowed me to keep all of these goods and riches. But he did say, let all these young men take what they can, because they deserve a portion for coming with me to help save your people. And that's a very honorable position to take, because it honors both his allies and most of all God. And that's something we need to always be able to differentiate as well. That we are giving God his portion, but also staying loyal and helping out those who have been with us as well. So moving on to chapter 15, verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus? Then Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. So God is coming and saying, look, I am providing for you. Don't be afraid. And Abram's saying, look, God, you have given me all this stuff, but I have no one to inherit it, no one from my own bloodline. My heir is someone who was born in my house, not of me. He was born of my house, of my servants. That's going to be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Then he brought him outside and said, look now toward heaven, and count the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, So shall your descendants be. And he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. So once again, the Lord is not making a new covenant, but he is reminding Abraham of the covenant he has already made, that his descendants will outnumber the stars in the heavens, because it will be all who accept Christ. And people will say, okay, well, what about all the people who lived before Christ was crucified? How did they get into heaven? Well, it's right there in verse 6. Abraham looked towards the promises of the Lord. See, how are we saved through Christ? Well, we're saved through faith. And lots of times that is looked down upon as being a blind thing. Oh, you have faith because you have no evidence. But that's not what faith means. Faith means we are placing our trust in something that we necessarily can't see or touch or feel with our senses. We are placing our trust in it. Now, secular people do this all the time. When it comes to science, they place their trust in the scientist and in their process and in their findings, sometimes for things that they cannot possibly prove. I mean, we know so much about space, but how much of it do we truly know? It's all based on theoretical science and processes. We can't travel to Jupiter and see if it is truly filled with all these gases. We can't travel to Titan and see if it's a giant moon. We can't travel 4 billion light years away and see a different star system and see that Goldilocks planet they're talking about. We need to take that on faith. We are placing trust in the people who have learned these things, and I got no problem with that. The problem comes when they turn around and say that we are blindly doing things. It's like, no, we place our trust in Christ. And what are we placing our trust in? We're placing our trust in his promises. We're placing our trust in his work, in what he had done, and what we have seen happen throughout our lives and history. Well, placing our trust in the promises of the Lord are how we get salvation. We place our trust in the work of Jesus Christ and the promises that are made. The covenant is made through that act. Well, how are people will be in heaven and be with the Lord before that act happened? Abraham believed in the Lord, and the Lord accounted it to him for righteousness. Human beings don't have righteousness on our own. We have it now through Christ. Back then, they had it by trusting in the covenant of God, as he had seen fit to reveal to him at that point. And that's what Abram did, time and time again. And the Lord accounted it to Abraham for righteousness. Then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees, out of Babylon, actually. That's what the Chaldeans were, to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it? And this is Abraham struggling with God because he's a very old man. And God continues to say these things. But God can see our entire race that we run in this life. Abraham can't. He can only see the moment he's living in. And as old as he is, he probably feels the end coming. So he's looking and going, God, you keep saying these things, but I don't see it. And I know we say that ourselves to God often. So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Then he brought all these to him, Abram brought them to God, and cut them in two down the middle and placed each piece opposite the other. But he did not cut the birds in two. And when the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Because as he's doing this, it's not easy to do. So the vultures are starting to come for the dead animal, and he has to drive them away. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell over Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them. Speaking of the time that the 12 tribes will spend in Egypt as slaves. And they will afflict them for 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Now, people will say all the time, unbelievers, like, how come a good God would drive out and commit genocide against all these people that are already in the nation to give his people a nation? How is he good? It's because those people were exceedingly wicked. But in the 4th generation after Joseph, the Israelites will return to the land. And by then the Amorites' iniquity would be complete. The Amorites could turn to God. They could recognize the blessings of even Abraham and turn to God. But they don't. And God is saying, look, it is not yet time for me to rain down judgment on them. They haven't been evil as long. But they will get there. I wish they wouldn't, but they will. And when that time happens, that's when your seed, when your descendants will come through and take possession of this land. God gives us chances to come to him. Whether we do or not, that's on us. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Canaanites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So, this is a change of the covenant, or an institution of a parallel covenant. I guess you could say that your descendants will outnumber the stars in the sky at some point. Your descendants will come out of their bondage. They will have this land. And if you notice, that land they're describing, he's describing, is a much bigger piece of land than the Israelites ever had, because they never took control of the entire land. They gave up. To this day, Israel is a portion of the size that God had promised to them, because they never took it all over. But God is telling Abram that all of these people will turn to wickedness. And like the people before the flood, they will be removed from the promised land. Your descendants will do it. I will be their shield. I will be their sword. I will be with them to bless them at every pass, to wipe the wickedness from the land I am promising you. That is a tough thing. When shall I inherit the land? Well, your children aren't going to inherit the land for another 400 plus years, Abraham. 500 years. That's a tough sell. But when we trust in God, we understand that God is not a gumball machine. He will bless us in his time, in his timing. And we need to be patient enough for him to reveal those blessings to us, and act on what he has promised us. Because we go through trials here. And sometimes people will say, how come we go through trials? Well, trials aren't always about us. Sometimes they're about those around us. I have always done programs like this for my children. Hey, maybe the blessings God has for my family line aren't for me. Maybe they aren't for me to have. Maybe they're for my kids. Maybe they're for my grandkids. And maybe these programs play a part. I don't know. I need to trust in him and let him act in his own timing. Well, thank you for being with me for another installment of Donning the Armor. I hope to see you again for the next installment. And until then, be blessed.